I used to think that everybody was adopted from outer space. That before we were born, we were just little seeds floating around in the sky, waiting for someone to come and get us. The selection process was random, and there was no rhyme or reason as to who our parents would be. In a way, I was right, because our chance to be born hinges on our parents' meeting. My parents met completely by chance due to a chain of events that was set in motion many years ago in a small apartment in Copenhagen. In this apartment, there lived a Danish poet called Casper Jørgensen. Casper was so worried about running out of ideas that he often could not think of anything to write. He therefore went to see Dr. Mørk, who specialized in this problem. Why don't you go on a holiday? Get some fresh air. Where can you go on holiday if you don't have any money and you don't speak French? What about Norway? It's cheap and they're practically Danish. Casper began to research Norwegian holiday possibilities. At the library he came across a book called Scandinavian Confusion about famous Swedes who were actually Norwegian and famous Norwegians who were actually Danish, and so on. This is how he discovered the Norwegian writer Sigrid Undset, who was originally Danish. She had written the epic novel Kristin Lavransdatter and had won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Kristin Lavransdatter is the story of Kristin, who is engaged to Simon. But Kristin falls in love with Erlend, and she breaks up with Simon and marries Erlend against her father's will. She regrets this fateful decision for the rest of her life and never forgives herself, no matter how many times she walks barefoot and pregnant on pilgrimage to the Nidarus Cathedral. This novel so profoundly moved Casper that he wrote a letter to Sigrid Undset. Dear Mrs. Undset, I am a Danish poet. May I please come and visit you in Norway for inspiration? Best regards, Casper Jørgensen. Dear Mr. Jørgensen, I could use a little inspiration myself nowadays. Please come and visit me anytime. Best regards, Sigrid Undset. And so it was that Casper went on holiday to Norway just as Dr. Mørk had prescribed. Casper went to the nearest farm to ask for shelter. I am a great admirer of Sigrid Undset and I'm on my way to Lillehammer to visit her. What a coincidence! My family is related to her. My third cousin's brother-in-law was Sigrid Undset's great-uncle's niece's husband's grandfather. So your family was originally from Denmark? Well, perhaps we're all originally from Denmark. Casper was offered food and shelter until the rain stopped. But as often happens in Norway, the rain never really stopped. Casper did not mind at all, for Lundegård had a beautiful daughter called Ingeborg, who tended to the chickens and romantically mapped the stars above the farm. A summer romance was in full bloom when Casper wrote a poem. Ingeborg, you changed my life. Ingeborg, please be my wife. She explained that although she would like to marry him, she was actually already engaged to the farmer across the valley. He was the son of her father's best friend and a well-respected member of the community. An August wedding was planned. This is exactly like when Kristin Lavransdatter can't marry Erland because she's engaged to Simon. But then she breaks up with him and marries Erland anyway, in spite of her father's stern objections. Not exactly. For Ingeborg had also read Kristin Lavransdatter and knew that disobeying one's father would lead to a life lived in the shadows of guilt and regret. Ingeborg gave Casper a lock of her hair and promised that she would not cut it until they were reunited. He forgot all about his intended visit to Sigrid Undset and returned to Denmark, heartbroken and empty-handed, but for the lock of his beloved's hair. How can I write when I feel so sad? Some people think that's the best time. Really. Casper tried to write, but nobody cared about his sad poetry. He reread Kristin Lavransdatter again and again, as if the cure for his broken heart could be found somewhere between the 1,500 pages. Ingeborg was unhappy too, and she regretted that she had not disobeyed her father and married Casper. "You'd better cut your hair before I trip in it and twist my ankle," said her husband. "There are worse things in life than a twisted ankle," answered Ingeborg. And then something much worse did happen. Ingeborg immediately wrote a letter to Casper telling him that she was now free to marry him. But Casper never received the letter, and Ingeborg waited in vain for his reply. Meanwhile, Ingeborg's hair grew and grew. She decided to employ the children in the neighborhood to comb and brush it for her. One of them was a little girl who was exceptionally good at arranging Ingeborg's hair in complicated braids and knots and elegant beehives. Her name was Veslemøy, and she became Ingeborg's favorite hairdresser. Ingeborg's life passed uneventfully for years, until the day that Sigrid Undset died. "You must go to the funeral." "Why?" "Because she was your relative." "But she was Danish." "When a relative dies, you go to the funeral whether she was Danish or not," said Veslemøy. Casper was grief-stricken by the death of his favorite author. You must go to the funeral, but it's in Norway. Just go. Casper did not like being reminded of death, but he went to Sigrid Undset's funeral anyway, and was glad he did, because there he was finally reunited with Ingeborg. Great, now I can finally cut my hair. Are you nuts? I love your hair. Casper quickly became living proof that some poets are better off happy than sad. He published a poetry collection called Joy and Happiness, which was translated to all the Scandinavian languages and became a bestseller of sorts. Ingeborg was happy too, but she was growing increasingly concerned about her split ends. When Casper one day tripped in her unbraided hair and broke his thumb, she saw an opportunity. She called Veslemøy, who was no longer a little girl but a young woman. She understood the urgency of the situation and jumped on the next train to Oslo to take the ferry to Copenhagen. The only available seat was next to a young man who was reading Casper's Joy and Happiness. His name was Petter, and he told Veslemøy that he was going to Copenhagen for inspiration and to meet Casper Jørgensen, who was his favorite poet. That's quite a coincidence, said Veslemøy. It remains to be said that Veslemøy gave Ingeborg a flattering haircut, that Petter's visit to Copenhagen was very inspiring, that Casper's thumb healed nicely, and last but not least, that Petter and Veslemøy fell in love with each other. Sometime later, they became my parents. But had it not been for the Danish poet and Sigrid Undset, a rainy summer in Norway, a slippery barn plank, a careless mailman, a hungry goat, a broken thumb and a crowded train, my parents might never have met at all. And who knows, I might still be a little seed floating around in the sky, waiting for someone to come and get me.